My name's Nathan, I'm 25 years old, and 3 months ago, I bought a villa by the coast. Not rented, not inherited, bought. It's a sleek, white modern build with big glass windows that overlook the sea, and on quiet mornings I sit out on the deck with my coffee and still don't fully believe it's mine. I paid for it outright. No mortgage, no cosigner, no debt. Just me, a used laptop, and nearly a decade of relentless grind. But if you ask my parents, they'll tell you I destroyed my brother's confidence and future by doing that. Let me back up a bit, because I already know how that sounds, like the title of one of those trashy drama shows my mom watches late at night. But I swear, this isn't one of those over-the-top, everyone is evil kind of stories. At least, it didn't start that way. I think that's what makes it sting more. I was born into what most people would call a decent middle-class family. My dad worked as a regional sales manager for a furniture company, and my mom stayed at home with us, me and my little brother, Zach. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house just outside of town. The grass was always a little too tall, the car always made some strange clicking noise, and Christmas was always tight, but we were never hungry. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. From a young age, I knew I had to figure things out for myself. My parents weren't exactly hands-off, but they also weren't particularly supportive in the way most parents are. Dad had a bit of that old school, boys don't cry, figure it out kind of mentality, and Mom, well, she loved us, but she lived and breathed for Zach. He was her sunshine child, her miracle, her little prince. I used to joke that if the house caught on fire, she'd run back in for Zach's baby photos before even checking if I made it out. Zach was born when I was 7. I remember being excited to be a big brother at first. I even helped pick out the color of his nursery walls, sky blue with little white stars. But almost immediately, things shifted. If I got a B+ on a test, it was good, but you should aim higher. When Zach scribbled some marker on the wall and called it a rocket, it was a sign of creativity. When I got my first part-time job at 16, stacking shelves at a grocery store after school, Dad just grunted. When Zach joined a soccer team at 10, the whole family drove 2 hours to watch his first game and threw a pizza party after. I kept my head down. I worked. I saved. I studied. Every dollar I made, I stashed away. I knew my parents weren't going to help me with college. They'd made that clear when I was a junior in high school. We're just trying to keep this house running, Dad had said. You're smart, you'll figure it out. So I did. I got into a state university with decent scholarships and commuted an hour each way from a tiny basement apartment I rented with 2 roommates. I took on tutoring gigs, freelance graphic design online, worked late-night shifts at a print shop. I lived on caffeine, microwave noodles, and sheer stubbornness. Meanwhile, Zach coasted through high school like a wind-up toy on a smooth table. He wasn't a bad kid, just incredibly average. No drive, no ambition. He got bored easily, quit things halfway, and always had an excuse for why something wasn't really for him. But my parents? They praised him for trying so many different things and told him he'd find his calling eventually. When I graduated, I didn't throw a party. I didn't even tell my parents until a week later. They didn't come. Said something about Zach having a dentist appointment. I didn't really expect them to, honestly. But still, I landed a decent junior role at a small tech startup right out of school. The pay wasn't great, but I learned fast. I climbed. I networked. I invested smartly. I didn't take vacations. I worked while my roommates played video games and while Zach took a gap year to figure himself out, which turned into 2 years of doing nothing, gaming until 3 a.m., sleeping till noon, and occasionally working part-time at the local movie theater when Mom pushed him. By 24, I had started my own web design firm. Small at first. Me and one friend. We hustled. We grew. We got lucky with a couple of contracts. I didn't blow money on dumb things. I reinvested everything. I moved into a clean little condo and drove the same beat-up Corolla I'd had since college. Then this year, after 2 long years of planning and saving, I bought the villa. I didn't tell anyone about it at first. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because it just felt surreal. Like I'd broken into some parallel reality where I actually made it. I remember walking through the empty halls and just whispering to myself, "You did it, man. You really did it." Eventually, I posted a picture. Nothing flashy. Just the view from the deck, sunset over the water, wine glass on the table. New beginnings, I captioned it. That's when it started. Within hours, I got a call from Mom. Not a text, A full-on phone call, which, from her, was rare. Her voice was unusually cold. "Nathan," she said, skipping any sort of greeting. "Is that your place?" I hesitated. "Yeah, I just closed on it last week." Silence. Then, "And you didn't think to tell your family?" I bit my tongue. "It's been a busy week. I was going to." Another pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You know, Zach saw that post. He hasn't gotten out of bed since. He feels like a failure because of you." I blinked. "What?" "He's been trying so hard lately," she said, her voice rising. "Looking for jobs, trying to get back on his feet. And then you go and shove your success in everyone's face? Don't you think that's a little insensitive?" It hit me like a slap. I hadn't mentioned Zach. I hadn't even thought about him when I posted that photo. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about anyone but me. "I didn't shove anything," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just shared something I was proud of." Mom scoffed. "Well, you should have thought about how it would affect your brother. He's already under enough pressure. And now he feels completely worthless compared to you." I could feel my pulse in my ears. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, where was this energy when I was working 60-hour weeks to pay my tuition? When I ate cereal for dinner 3 nights a week? When Zach was playing video games, and you were praising him for relaxing his mind? But I didn't. I just said, "I'm sorry Zach's feeling that way. But I've worked hard for this." That's when she said it. "You didn't get there alone, Nathan. Don't forget who raised you, who kept food on the table, who made sacrifices for you. You owe this family." And just like that, something snapped. It wasn't just the guilt trip. It was the years of being invisible. The years of scraping by while Zach got gold stars for just showing up. The years of being told I'd figure it out, while all the praise and resources went to the golden boy. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to say something I'd regret. But instead, I just muttered, "I need to go." I thought that would be the end of it. A tense call. Maybe some distance. Maybe even a few months of silence, which honestly would have been fine by me. But I was wrong. Because that phone call, that was just the first shot. The first pebble before the avalanche. And the next thing that happened made everything so much worse. I didn't hear from Mom or Dad for a couple weeks after that call. No texts. No check-ins. Not even a passive-aggressive Facebook comment under one of my photos. It was eerily quiet, but honestly, it was kind of peaceful. For once, my head was clear. I had my work, my space, my ocean view. I even started hosting some low-key gatherings. Colleagues, friends, a couple clients who were more like mentors. It felt good to finally live without dragging around this invisible anchor called obligation. But peace, in my family, is usually a sign of the storm getting ready to hit. It started with a message from Zach. It was short. No greeting. No punctuation. "Hey, heard you got a house, LOL." I stared at it for a good minute. The lack of punctuation wasn't unusual. Zach always typed like that. But the tone felt off. Like he was trying to be casual, but I could read the bitterness behind the LOL. I replied, trying to keep it neutral. "Yeah, just closed last week. It's been a long journey." He left me on read. The next day, I got a call from my aunt. She's my dad's younger sister, lives in Oregon, and we only really talk on holidays. But she was calling me out of the blue. "Nate," she said, "your mom's been calling everyone in the family saying you're," what did she say? "Acting like you're better than everyone now? That you're trying to show off." I was stunned. "What? No, I haven't." She also said you're refusing to help Zach out. That you told him he was on his own and not your problem. I clenched my jaw. I never said that. I literally haven't even talked to Zach since he messaged me LOL. That's it. She sighed. I figured something wasn't adding up. I told her she was overreacting. But, well, you know how she is when it comes to your brother. I thanked her for the heads up, then just sat there for a while, staring at the phone. I didn't understand. Why was she doing this? I hadn't cut anyone off. I hadn't rubbed anything in anyone's face. I hadn't gloated or posted pictures of Lamborghinis or popped champagne on Instagram. I posted a sunset. A sunset. It became clear that this wasn't about a post. It was about the fact that I had done something they didn't expect. Something Zach wasn't close to doing. And that was a threat. Still, I didn't retaliate. I didn't post about my family. I didn't try to clear my name with every relative. I figured it would blow over. Maybe they'd cool off. Maybe they'd realize how ridiculous they were being. Then came the barbecue. Every summer, my parents host this big backyard barbecue with extended family and a few of their friends. It's one of those events where plastic chairs sink into the lawn, The burgers are always slightly burned, and everyone's pretending they actually enjoy being outside in 90-degree heat. I hadn't gone in 3 years. Work, life, and truthfully, I just didn't feel like subjecting myself to hours of microaggressions from people who thought Zach just needed time to find himself. This year, I wasn't planning to go either. But my aunt, same one who warned me, called again and said, "You should come. Just for an hour. Set the record straight. You don't have to make a speech, but let people see for themselves that you're still the same guy." So I did. I pulled up in my 10-year-old Corolla wearing a button-down shirt and jeans. I even brought a bottle of decent wine as a host gift. Try to keep it humble, respectful, low-key. The moment I stepped into the backyard, I felt it. The stares, the hushed murmurs, the fake smiles. Someone, I later found out it was one of Mom's friends from church, muttered, "Oh look, it's Mr. Villa." Another whispered, "Guess we know who won the sibling lottery." I smiled through it, said hi, shook hands, greeted uncles and cousins I barely knew, kept it light. Then I saw Zach. He was sitting under the shade of the big oak tree, sunglasses on, headphones around his neck, nursing a soda like he was at a music festival. His hair was longer, and he had this shaggy, careless look like he'd been living in hoodies for months. When he saw me, he gave this little wave, more of a flick, really. I walked over. "Hey," I said. He nodded. "Sup? How've you been?" He shrugged. "Whatever." I waited, hoping for something more. Nothing came. "You still looking for jobs?" Another shrug. "Market's garbage. No one's hiring." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's rough out there. Let me know if you want help with resumes, or—" "I'm not asking for your help," he said flatly. That stopped me. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was cold. "Okay," I said after a moment. "Just offering." He turned his attention back to his phone. That was the end of that. I started to walk away, but that's when I heard Mom call out, loud enough for half the yard to hear. "Zach, sweetheart, don't worry. Some people like to buy respect, but you've got something way more valuable. Heart." I turned around, stunned. She was standing at the grill with a spatula in hand, looking right at me. I didn't say anything. I just blinked and went back to the folding chair someone had offered me. But the damage was done. Over the next hour, I overheard whispers and backhanded comments. One uncle asked me if I was planning to retire early and leave the rest of us to rot. Another joked that I should loan Zach a few million so he can catch up. I left after 90 minutes. I didn't say goodbye. No one stopped me. The final straw came a week later. I got home from a business trip, just a short flight for a client pitch, and found something strange waiting in my mailbox. It was a handwritten envelope with no return address. Inside was a typed letter. No signature. No salutation. "You should be ashamed. While your brother is struggling to get his life together, you're flaunting your wealth like a trophy. Your success means nothing if it comes at the cost of your family's unity. Real men lift others up, not leave them behind." I stared at it, hands shaking. Who sent this? My parents? Zach? A friend of theirs? I had no idea. But someone wanted me to feel like the villain in my own story. And for a moment, it worked. I sat down on the edge of my bed, letter in hand, and asked myself something I hadn't in years. Am I being selfish? Then I remembered every night I spent hunched over textbooks, every double shift, every moment I doubted myself while watching Zach sleep in until noon. I remembered the silence when I graduated, the absence of support, the countless times I was told you're fine, while Zach was spoon-fed every excuse. No, I wasn't being selfish. I was surviving. I was building something from scratch. I wasn't asking them to clap for me. I just wanted to live my life without being dragged back into their insecurity-laced circus. But they couldn't let that happen. Because 2 weeks after the letter, I got a text from Zach. "Hey, I was thinking, would be cool if I could move into the villa with you. Just for a bit. Need a fresh start. Can help with groceries, or whatever." I sat there in disbelief. No apology. No reflection. No acknowledgement of the way he or Mom had treated me. Just a casual move-in. I didn't reply. 2 days later, I got another text. This one from Mom. "You're being cruel, Nathan. All he wants is a chance. Why are you acting like he's a stranger? You owe your brother that much." I didn't respond to that one either. Then Dad called. That was rare. He doesn't usually get involved in the drama unless someone asks him to play mediator. His voice was calm, but firm. "Son," he said, "I know you've worked hard. No one's denying that. But this family's been through a lot. Zach's been lost lately. Moving in with you might help get him back on track. A change of scenery. Some inspiration. Dad, I said, I haven't even had time to settle in. This is my first real home. I'm not turning it into a rehab center for Zach's identity crisis. There was a long pause. You're being harsh. I'm being honest. He sighed. We just thought. No, you assumed. None of you asked. You didn't even congratulate me. All I've heard is how my success is apparently some sort of attack on Zach. How I'm somehow responsible for his feelings, his future. I'm not. More silence. Then he muttered, We're just disappointed. We expected better from you. That was it. That was the moment. Not angry. Not yelling. Just this sharp, quiet sentence meant to cut me down. And it did. Because that was the moment I realized something terrifying but liberating. I wasn't their son anymore. Not really. I was a benchmark. A reminder. A symbol of what Zach hadn't done. And as long as I kept growing, they would keep shrinking me in their minds to make room for his excuses. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my deck, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The moon was bright. The air was cool. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something inside me shift. I was done waiting for their approval. But what came next? That is when the betrayal hit me like a freight train. And it started with my name. On a bank account I never opened. When I saw my name listed as a joint holder on a bank account I never opened, my stomach dropped like an anchor. It started innocently enough, just an email from my bank saying, Thank you for updating your joint account details. At first, I figured it was a phishing attempt. I checked the sender. Legitimate. I logged into my actual bank portal. The new account was there. A checking account opened 2 days prior, bearing my full legal name and Zachary's, right below mine. I froze. My first thought was identity theft. My second thought was how? Because I'm careful. Paranoid, even. I use encrypted password managers, change my logins every quarter, and I never leave physical mail unattended. I called the bank immediately. After 45 minutes on hold and bouncing between departments, a rep explained, calmly, almost apologetically, that the account had been opened in person at a local branch. Both parties were present, she said. IDs were verified. No, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I was out of the state. I was in San Diego for work. I have flight receipts and a hotel bill to prove it. She hesitated. That's very strange. We'll escalate this. You may need to file a fraud report. I did. I filed the report, requested full documentation, and drove straight to the branch where it supposedly happened. That's where I saw the security footage. Zach, standing at the counter, smiling, wearing my old college hoodie, and in his hand my expired driver's license. My pulse spiked. I sat in that little cubicle with the branch manager, watching my brother commit actual, literal bank fraud using an ID I hadn't seen in 3 years. Can I have a copy of this footage? I asked quietly. We'll need legal authorization for that, the manager replied. I stepped outside and leaned against my car, trying not to scream. This wasn't just a betrayal. This wasn't petty jealousy or passive-aggressive jabs at a barbecue. This was a crime. A premeditated, paper-trailed crime. And it was my brother. I drove home in silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I wrote down everything. Every call, every message, every time my family guilt-tripped me. It all lined up now. The slow-pressure campaign. The talks of helping Zach. The accusations of selfishness. It was never about family. It was about money. And somehow, they thought I'd be too ashamed or confused or family loyal to fight back. But they didn't realize something. I had already hit my emotional rock bottom months ago. That quiet kind of bottom where the people you trust most look at your achievements and feel threatened, not proud. The kind where silence replaces warmth and holidays start to feel like negotiations. This fraud, this was just confirmation. I filed a police report. I had to. My accountant told me that leaving my name on that account, even for a week, opened me up to liability. If Zach overdrafted or used it for illegal transfers, I could be held accountable. And when the officer took my statement, there was no hesitation in my voice. He used my expired ID. He forged my signature. I want to press charges. A week passed. 2. I heard nothing from my family. Not even a what's going on. No one tried to defend Zach. No one reached out. It was almost like they knew what was coming and decided to preemptively cut me off. It hurt, way more than I expected. Because the truth is, I didn't want to burn bridges. I just didn't want to drown on them. The formal investigation took about a month. During that time, I went radio silent. No texts, no calls. I deleted family contacts, locked down my credit reports, and got my legal ducks in a row. And yet, even as I did all that, there were nights I sat on my deck and thought, how did it come to this? There was a point, years ago, when I used to daydream about success, about making it, about coming home for Christmas one year with nice gifts, maybe offering to fix the roof on my parents' house, or helping Zach buy his first car. I imagined us all laughing over dinner, Dad raising a toast, Mom telling me how proud she was. But I had climbed that mountain, and when I turned around, they weren't waiting at the top. They were still at the bottom, staring up, resenting me for the view. That realization broke something in me, but something else grew in its place. A resolve, a clarity I didn't know I needed. I stopped trying to justify myself. I stopped writing those long, unsent drafts of text to my mom. I stopped imagining hypothetical reunions. Instead, I poured myself into rebuilding, not just professionally, but personally. I went to therapy. For the first time in my life, I sat across from someone who wasn't trying to guilt me or fix me or remind me where I came from. She just listened. She helped me name things: emotional parentification, golden child syndrome, guilt-based control. And once I could name it, I could untangle it. I started reconnecting with old friends, people who had cheered me on quietly over the years, but never asked for anything. I took a solo trip to Portugal. I learned to cook more than 3 meals. I hosted dinners where no one mentioned success or failure, just music and food and laughter. And slowly, something remarkable happened. I started feeling light again. My company grew. We landed a huge contract with a European client. I expanded my team, hired a project manager, and stepped back from the 70-hour weeks. I built systems, trained leaders, created space. I even started mentoring a couple of high school students in tech. Kids like me, who came from homes where figure it out was the only guidance they got. And through it all, I kept quiet about my family. I didn't trash them online. I didn't write exposés or rants. I just lived. But the universe has a strange sense of timing. Because just when things were beginning to feel normal again, I got a letter in the mail. A real one. Handwritten. Loopy cursive. Floral stationery. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was from Mom. Inside was a folded note. No, dear Nathan. No love, Mom. Just this. Zach made a mistake. He was desperate. You should have come to us before involving the police. Families don't do this to each other. You've broken this family. I read it twice. Then I set it down on the kitchen counter, stared at it for a moment, and finally, let myself feel it. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just relief. Because that letter told me everything I needed to know. Even now, after the fraud, the lies, the years of silence, they still couldn't see me as anything more than an extension of Zach's shadow. There was no apology. Only blame. Only expectation. Only entitlement. And that was when I knew I hadn't broken the family. I had just stopped being broken by it. What came next wasn't revenge. Not in the cinematic sense. No elaborate schemes or courtroom drama. Just boundaries. Silence. Distance. Growth. But a storm was still brewing, because while I had found my peace, Zach had not. And the next time I saw him, he wasn't alone. He brought a lawyer. And what they were about to demand would make everything before look like child's play. He didn't even knock. Zach just showed up. I was working from my home office upstairs when I saw him through the window, standing at the gate in a charcoal blazer that didn't quite fit, squinting against the sun. And next to him stood a man in a stiff blue suit, holding a leather briefcase and checking his watch like he had a dentist appointment right after ruining someone's day. I didn't go down right away. I watched them for a second, unmoving. 2 silhouettes against the bright sea background. I had a weird, hollow feeling in my chest, like I'd stepped into a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. Then the intercom buzzed. Hey, Nathan. Zach's voice crackled through. We need to talk. I brought someone who can explain everything. He sounded nervous. Not apologetic. Not angry. But rehearsed. Like he'd practiced those exact words a dozen times. I hit the button and said, this isn't a good time. He hesitated. Look, it's important. It's not what you think. It's business. Business. I almost laughed. But I'd been preparing for something like this. Ever since the fake bank account, I'd started imagining worst-case scenarios. I hadn't predicted this, exactly, but I had learned one thing from building my company. When someone wants a meeting without warning, they're either selling you something or they're planning to take something from you. I buzzed them in any way, not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted evidence. They walked up the stone path, and I met them outside. The lawyer introduced himself with a toothy grin and handed me a card. Jacob Feldman, Estate Law and Family Arbitration. Zach stood beside him, visibly fidgeting, his hands buried in his pockets. I didn't invite them in. I led them to the shaded patio area and gestured toward 2 chairs. I stayed standing. Jacob opened a leather folder and began with a cheery, artificial tone. Nathan, thank you for your time. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Zachary. My brother, I interrupted flatly. You can just say my brother. He smiled like I cracked a joke. Of course. Your brother has come to me with some concerns about a verbal agreement made between you two regarding shared ownership of assets accumulated during your joint upbringing. He believes there is cause to consider a petition for equitable distribution under. I held up my hand. Stop. Jacob blinked. I beg your pardon. I turned to Zach. Is this your idea? Zach glanced at the ground, then back at me. It's not what it sounds like. I'm not trying to take anything. I think I deserve something. You had all these advantages, and I was never really given a shot. And now you've got this villa, the business, everything, and I'm out here. What advantages? My voice rose unplanned. You had school paid for, he said quickly. Not by mom and dad, but by scholarships. That's privilege. You got a car. You got opportunities. You got out. I stared at him in disbelief. Zach, I bought that car for $1,200 off a guy from Craigslist and rebuilt the radiator myself. I worked 4 jobs to get through college. You slept through high school. He looked wounded. You're missing the point. No, I said. You are. Jacob cleared his throat. If I may, there's a precedent here. Shared upbringing can sometimes be argued as grounds for implied partnership, especially in cases where one sibling benefited disproportionately from intangible family resources, such as emotional support or indirect financial advantage. I almost laughed. Let me get this straight, I said. Your angle is that because I succeeded with less, I somehow owe more? Jacob raised his hands, palms open. This doesn't have to be adversarial. We're just seeking a mediation, a conversation. And what, exactly, I said slowly, is Zach hoping to get out of this conversation? Zach looked away. Jacob didn't miss a beat. A 25% stake in your company, or an equivalent buyout, and a short-term housing allowance, seeing as you have more than enough room here to support him while the transition is worked out. The air went still. I stared at both of them. The ocean kept crashing behind me, unbothered. Birds called. A breeze moved through the palm trees. I took a breath, and then I laughed. Not bitterly, not angrily, just a short, stunned bark of disbelief. Wow, I said. You really don't get it. Zach looked like he wanted to speak, but I held up a finger. No, you don't talk now. I turned to Jacob. This meeting is over. If you attempt legal action, I have documentation, witnesses, and a full timeline of every instance where Zach attempted to access my accounts, impersonated me at a bank, and opened fraudulent lines of credit. I have a police report, a fraud investigation, and the security footage. If you want to play the long game, Jacob, be my guest. But I will countersue for damages, defamation, and emotional harassment. Jacob's mouth opened, then closed. Zach looked like a kid caught stealing from a cookie jar. Please, he said, can we just talk like brothers? I didn't mean for it to get to this. I stared at him. Neither did I said. But here we are. I walked them both to the gate. No yelling, no drama, just cold steel in my spine. When they were gone, I sat back down on the patio and stared at the ocean for a long, long time. Then I made a call, not to a lawyer, to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Nico. Back in college, Nico and I were dorm neighbors. He was brilliant, chaotic, and slightly terrifying when someone crossed him. He majored in digital security and now ran his own consulting firm, mostly high-end cybersecurity for political campaigns and corporate clients. But every once in a while, when the story was juicy enough, he'd help out a friend. I told him the basics. He whistled. Your brother's got guts. Dumb guts, but guts. Can you help me build a wall? I asked. Better, he said. I'll build you a mirror maze. Let them chase their own reflections. Over the next few weeks, we quietly started reinforcing everything. My accounts, my company's back end, my digital footprint. Nico traced suspicious IPs accessing my social profiles. We set up alerts. He even found an old recovery email linked to an ancient PayPal account, one I'd forgotten about, but Zach apparently hadn't. He's been trying to guess your passwords for years, Nico said. This wasn't random. He's been laying groundwork. That rattled me, but it also hardened me. So I did something I never thought I would. I pulled the original business name registration documents from when I founded my company. I updated the structure. I rewrote the bylaws. And then I quietly moved all remaining assets under a new parent LLC, one Zach didn't know existed. Different name, different bank, different state. I called in a few favors with some clients in real estate and offloaded a few investment properties into a holding company, too. Not illegal, just smart. Every penny I'd earned was now untouchable. And still, I didn't go on the attack. Not yet. Because the game had changed. Zach thought this was about inheritance, about division, about fairness. He still believed he was owed a seat at the table simply because we shared blood. But I'd outgrown the table. I was building a fortress. And then came the opportunity one hadn't expected. My father called. Not to scold me, not to beg, but to say he was worried. About Mom. Apparently, she'd been spiraling, losing sleep, blaming herself, walking around the house muttering that she should have handled it differently. She wants to talk, he said quietly, to fix things. I said nothing. He added, she misses you. I waited a few seconds before responding. Then she can come to me, I said. But not alone. What do you mean? I looked out over the water. I want the whole family here. Mom, you, Zach. No lawyers. No surprise guests. One conversation. One table. And everything on the record. Dad hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea. It's not, I said. But it's the only one I'm offering. He hung up without replying. The next day, I got a text. Sunday, 3 p.m. We'll be there. I looked at the message, then at the quiet villa around me. The table was already set. The mics were hidden. The cameras were in place. And the script? Still unwritten. But I knew this much. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about closure. And I was going to make sure every word of it stayed on the record. Because after years of guilt, silence, and sacrifice, I was finally taking my story back. They arrived 10 minutes early. That alone told me everything. Mom was dressed like she was going to church. Pastel sweater, gold necklace, hair done just right. She held a covered tray like it was an offering. Dad walked behind her, stiff and silent, wearing the same jacket he wore to my graduation, the one they never showed up for. Zach trailed after them with his hands shoved deep in his pockets and a nervous smile plastered on his face, like he thought this was just going to be a heart-to-heart with coffee and cookies. I opened the door and said nothing, just held it long enough for them to shuffle in. Mom tried to hand me the tray, cookies, I guessed, and I simply motioned toward the dining table and said, let's sit. They obeyed. The table was long and made of solid oak, one of the first custom pieces I'd splurged on for the villa. At one end was my seat. On the other side, 3 chairs, bottles of water, mugs, napkins. Nothing else. No warmth. No snacks. No distractions. Just space. And silence. I sat down. Zach cleared his throat. This feels intense, he joked. No one laughed. Mom placed the tray down and folded her hands. Nathan, we just want to talk. As a family. I nodded once. Good. Because I have some things I need to say. And I'd appreciate it if no one interrupts until I'm done. Dad opened his mouth, but stopped himself. Mom gave a small nod. Of course, sweetheart. I reached below the table and clicked the small remote in my hand. The audio recorder, hidden inside the decorative fruit bowl at the center of the table, lit up silently. I started. Zach, I said, turning to him first. You used my expired ID to impersonate me. You opened a bank account with my name on it. You linked it to old financial information and attempted to use it to secure credit. He squirmed. I didn't. Don't. I have the security footage. I have bank logs. I filed a police report. Mom gasped. Dad looked at Zach sharply. Is that true? I didn't mean to, Zach started. But you did, I said flatly. You did it. You got caught. And instead of apologizing, you hired a lawyer and tried to stake a claim on my company. My house. My money. I thought we could work something out, he snapped. You thought I was weak, I corrected. You thought I wouldn't fight back. That I'd cave. That I'd do what I've always done. Keep quiet, stay mature, and carry the family shame while you played victim. His eyes burned. I've been struggling. So did I said. For years. I just didn't ask everyone else to bleed for it. The room was heavy. No one moved. I turned to Mom. And you? You knew. Maybe not the fraud, but you knew what he was doing. You fed it. You told the family I was cruel. You told people I'd abandoned you. Mom's lip trembled. I just wanted to protect him. No, I said. You wanted to protect the idea of him. The one you built up in your head. The golden child. You spent your life cushioning his fall while telling me I had to fly on my own. Her voice cracked. You don't understand how hard it's been. I do, I said. Because I lived it. I made it. Alone. Dad finally spoke. What do you want from us, Nathan? I looked at him. I want accountability. I want this behavior to stop. I want you to admit what happened, and I want Zach to sign a legal document stating he relinquishes any future claims on my business, my home, or my financial holdings. I brought copies. I reached into a folder and laid down the stack of papers. Zach scoffed. Are you serious? As a heart attack, I said. You already tried to go after me once. I'm not giving you a second shot. Mom pushed the tray of cookies toward me, her eyes wide and wet. Nathan, please. We're family. I leaned forward. And where was that family when I was working 16-hour shifts? When I had to eat plain rice for 3 days because I couldn't afford groceries? When I graduated and no one even sent a card? No answer. I continued, voice steady. You don't get to weaponize blood ties when it's convenient. You either act like family when it counts, or you forfeit the title. Zach folded his arms. I'm not signing anything. I smiled. That's fine. He looked confused. What? I pulled out a slim black case and placed it on the table. See, I've already protected everything. Moved assets. Created holding companies. Transferred my intellectual property. What's left in my name? Just this house. Zach blinked. So, what's the paper for? I tilted my head. You signing it doesn't protect me anymore. It protects you. He frowned. From what? I opened the black case. Inside was a manila envelope. From this. I slid it across the table. He opened it and immediately blanched. Inside were full-color printouts of the bank security footage, copies of the police report, screenshots of him trying to access my old PayPal, and flagged attempts to reset my email passwords from his devices. Zach's hands started to shake. I could have pressed full charges, I said. Still can. This package is sealed and ready to send to the DA. Your lawyer knows how serious this can get. Fraud. Identity theft. Attempted access to protected accounts. Zach looked at our parents, panicked. Mom. Dad. Say something. They said nothing. I stood up. You sign the paper. I shred the file. We never speak again. You walk away free. Zach's mouth opened, then closed. He grabbed the pen. He signed, then shoved the paper back at me with shaking fingers. I picked it up and checked the signature. I nodded, folded it, and slid it into the folder. I reached for the manila envelope. Then I calmly dropped it into the fireplace and lit a match. We all watched it burn. No one said a word. When it was nothing but ash, I turned back to them. This conversation is over. Mom stood. Her eyes were wet. Please. We can fix this. We're still your parents. I looked at her for a long moment. No, I said quietly. You were just the people I came from. I walked to the front door and held it open. They left. One by one. No hugs. No goodbyes. Just silence and footsteps. When the door shut behind them, I locked it. And then, for the first time in my life, I exhaled. It was done. Not just the legal part. The emotional part. The ghost of guilt. The weight of unspoken pain. The years of walking on eggshells. Gone. I poured myself a drink. Sat on the deck. Watched the sun begin to set. And I realized something. Freedom doesn't always come from success. Sometimes, it comes from letting go of the people who demand you fail just to feel whole. They took my silence for weakness, but I built my peace in that silence. And now, I have both the silence and the last word.